Let me guess how your summer went. At some point in the last couple months, you ended up in a gravel parking lot at 9 o'clock at night. There were lights spinning. There was a smell, fried dough, diesel, and something sweet you couldn't name. And you looked down and you had $12 left out of the 80 you walked in with. And you didn't even feel robbed. That's the crazy part. You felt fine. Now here's the question nobody asks on the drive home. Where did that $80 actually go? Because that carnival wasn't there last Tuesday. And by next Tuesday, it'll be gone. All of it. The Ferris wheel, the funnel cake trailer, the giant inflatable slide, the guy who guessed your weight, all of it folds up, gets loaded onto trucks, and drives 300 miles overnight to do the exact same thing to a different town. That is not a fun business. That is a brutally difficult logistics business wearing a fun costume. Here's something that took me a long time to understand. The rides are not the business. The rides are the parking lot. Stick with me on that, because it's the whole thing. I got into this by accident about 9 years ago. A guy I'd known through a lending relationship, I'll call him Jared, because that's his name and he's not shy, called me up in February and said, and I quote, "I think I want to buy a Carnival." I laughed. He didn't. Turns out Jared had sold a landscaping company for a decent number, spent his whole childhood at the county fair in Northeast Ohio, and had it in his head that this was a cash business with no landlord and no competition. A family was retiring out of the industry, 40 pieces of equipment, a route, some trucks. So I did the work. And what I found was so much weirder and so much more interesting than I expected that I've been reading about this industry ever since. Let's start where Jared started, with the steel. A traveling carnival is, on paper, a pile of very expensive metal. The little stuff kiddie rides, a small carousel, a jumpy castle you can get into for tens of thousands of dollars. A used spinning ride, one of those things that flips you upside down and makes a teenager scream. Now you're talking real money, mid-six figures depending on condition and manufacturer. A big transportable Ferris wheel, the kind that's the visual anchor of the whole midway, that can run you well past $1 million new. And here's what makes it worse. That machine has to fold. Think about that engineering problem for 1 second. You need a 50-foot tall structure that spins human beings through the air, that collapses onto a trailer, drives on the interstate, and gets rebuilt on uneven ground in a field in Nebraska by a crew of 8 guys in about 6 hours, and then does it again 40 times in 1 year. Compare that to a fixed amusement park. A park bolts a coaster to a concrete foundation once and inspects it every morning for 30 years. A traveling ride gets torn down and rebuilt more times in 1 season than most permanent rides get touched in a decade. Every one of those cycles is wear. So, the depreciation on this equipment isn't calendar-based, it's cycle-based. And nobody tells you that when you're shopping. When I was doing Jared's deal, I sat in a truck for 2 hours with a guy I'll call Bud. Bud was 71, third generation, and his grandfather had run a show out of Indiana in the 1940s. I asked him a very finance-brain question. I said, "What's your annual maintenance budget as a percentage of equipment value?" And he looked at me like I'd asked him what color the number 7 is. He said, "Son, I don't have a maintenance budget. I have a welder, and he works every day." That is the answer. In this business, maintenance isn't a line item you can defer for a quarter to make your numbers look better. If the welder doesn't work today, the ride doesn't open Friday. And if the ride doesn't open Friday, you didn't just lose the revenue, you might have violated your contract with the fair. Which brings us to the second cost, and it's the one that surprises everybody. In the industry, they don't call it moving. They call it the jump. Here's what a jump actually looks like. The fair closes at 11 on Sunday night. By midnight, the crew is tearing down. They work through the night. By dawn, 40, 50, sometimes 80 semi-trailer loads are lined up in the dark. Then they drive. Then they get to the next lot, which might be a field, might be a parking lot with terrible drainage, and they start building, and they have to be inspected and opened by Wednesday afternoon. So you're running a trucking company, a big one. Diesel, drivers, DOT compliance plus generators, because most of these lots don't have anywhere near the power you need. You haul your own electrical grid and burn fuel to run it all day, every day. And in 2026, that math got worse. I saw a story out of Illinois where a carnival company told the festival committee they had to raise ticket prices a quarter more per ticket, and the reason they gave was fuel. Straight up. Not greed, not demand. Diesel. Note, verify current diesel pricing and this specific example before recording. Fuel is one of the largest variable costs in the business, and it's completely outside your control, and you cannot pass it through cleanly. A grocery store raises the price of eggs, and people grumble and buy eggs. A carnival raises the price of a ride ticket, and the local news runs a segment about how the fare is getting too expensive for families. There's an emotional price ceiling on this product that has nothing to do with your cost structure. That's a genuinely bad spot to be in as an operator. Your inputs are commodity priced, and your outputs are nostalgia priced. Okay, so you've got the steel and you've got the trucks. Now you need about 150 people who are willing to live in a bunkhouse trailer, work 16-hour days, and move to a new town every 5 days from March to October. Try hiring that in your county. Go ahead, I'll wait. This industry runs on a visa program called H-2B. It's for temporary, non-agricultural seasonal work. Think hotel housekeeping, landscaping, seafood processing, and amusement. Congress caps it at 66,000 visas a year, split 33,000 in each half. And every single year, it's a bloodbath. For fiscal 2026, the second half cap, that's the one that covers the entire summer fair season, was hit on March 20th. Government then released a supplemental allocation of up to 64,716 additional visas, and one of those chunks, over 27,000 for April start dates, filled up and hit its cap by the 21st of April. Read that again. The extra visas that were supposed to be the relief valve filled in weeks. Note, confirm the latest H-2B figures and any legislative changes before recording this moves fast. I want you to sit with what that means as an owner. In January, you don't know how many workers you're going to have in June. You have signed contracts with fair boards that specify how many rides you'll operate. Rides you can't staff are rides you can't open. Rides you can't open are contract breaches. There's a man I met, I'll call him Tomas, who was on his 11th season when I talked to him. 11th. He came up from Sinaloa every year, ran the same ride, knew the ride better than the guy who owned it. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said the hardest part isn't the hours. It's that you build a whole life with 40 people, and then in November it just stops. And you go home, and you don't know if the paperwork will work out next year. That's not a labor line item. That's a supply chain with a heartbeat. And any operator who's smart treats returning workers like the strategic asset they are. Because a rookie crew doesn't just work slower, a rookie crew tears down slower, which means you leave later, which means you arrive later, which means you might not open on time. Labor efficiency in this business isn't about payroll. It's about the clock. Here's where the whole thing snapped into focus for me. You don't own the land. You never own the land. You show up on somebody else's dirt. And the deal you sign with the fair board or the town committee is, functionally, a commercial lease. Specifically, it's percentage rent. Small town, church festival, 4th of July thing in a parking lot. The organizer might take 15 to 25% of your ride gross, sometimes on a sliding scale, plus a flat fee per food trailer and per game booth. That's a real contract structure, flat minimum, percentage over a threshold. Big state fair, top 50 event, hundreds of thousands of people through the gate. Now the fair board has all the leverage, because there are only so many companies in North America that can physically deliver a midway that size. The percentage the fair takes climbs steeply, and you may be on the hook for advanced ticket programs and midway improvements on top of it. Does this sound familiar to anyone who's ever looked at a retail lease? Because it's the same instrument. Base rent, percentage rent over breakpoint, common area maintenance, and that is when I realized what a traveling carnival actually is. It's a shopping mall that folds into 40 trucks and rebuilds itself every 5 days. The rides are the anchor tenants. They're the Sears, the Macy's. Enormously expensive, capital intensive, thin margin, and their entire job is to pull bodies onto the property. The games and the food are the inline tenants. Small footprint, tiny capital cost, and margins that would make a software founder blush. Once you see it that way, every strange decision this industry makes suddenly makes sense. Let's talk about a funnel cake. I know a concessionaire, call him Sam, third-generation Italian family out of Florida, and his trailer has been in the same family since the 60s. Sam sells a funnel cake for something like $12 or $13. The ingredients? Flour, oil, sugar, a little powdered sugar on top. The food cost is a rounding error. We're talking cents on the dollar. Now, before you go start a funnel cake empire, understand the real costs are propane, labor, the space fee to the fair, and the fact that your entire year's revenue is compressed into about 20 weekends. But on a per-unit basis, it's one of the highest margin food items sold anywhere in America. Sam told me the single most important number in his business isn't food cost at all, it's throughput. How many units per hour can that fryer produce during the 4-hour window when everyone is hungry at the same time? Because the demand is not smooth. It's a spike. Saturday, 6 to 10 p.m. If your line moves slow, you didn't lose a customer, you lost the entire weekend's upside. Because those people are not coming back Tuesday. There is no Tuesday. That is a fundamentally different business than a restaurant. A restaurant optimizes for the year. A concession optimizes for 4 hours. Now the games. The games are where the psychology lives, and honestly, where the finance lesson lives too. There are games where you win every single time the duck pond, where a kid grabs a rubber duck and there's a number on the bottom. In the industry, those are called hanky-panks, and the prize you get is worth a small fraction of what you paid for the play. That's not a trick, that's the model. You are buying a moment, and the toy is the receipt. Then there are the hard games, the ones with the milk bottles, the basketball hoop that looks normal and is not normal, the big plush hanging up top that you've decided your kid needs. I talked to a game operator once, a woman I'll call Ren, who ran a booth for years. She explained the economics to me in 90 seconds, and I've thought about it ever since. She said the big plush is not a prize. The big plush is advertising inventory. Its job is to hang there, be visible from 40 feet away, and convert foot traffic into players. The medium and small prizes are what actually get handed out, and those cost a few dollars each at wholesale. The giant ones almost never leave. And when someone does win one, that's not a loss, that's a marketing event. A person now walks the entire midway carrying a 6-foot banana. Free advertising all night. And here's the part that stuck with me. She said the game isn't rigged. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be honestly hard while looking easy. That gap between how hard something looks and how hard it is where the entire margin lives. Which, if you've spent any time around retail trading, options, or sports betting, might sound uncomfortably familiar. So we've got a mall on wheels with great tenant margins. What's the catch? Rain. I want to be very clear about how violent this risk is. Your revenue is concentrated into roughly 5 days per event, and within those 5 days, it's concentrated into 2 nights, Friday and Saturday. If it rains Friday and Saturday, you did not have a slow week. You had a zero. And your costs, the trucking, the fuel, the crew, the generators, the setup, labor, those were all incurred before the first customer walked in. It's the worst possible cost structure for a weather-dependent product. Almost everything is fixed and front-loaded. Almost all the revenue is variable and back-loaded. I once had a long lunch with an insurance broker who specializes in amusement risk, a guy named Curtis. He told me the rain thing is actually the manageable risk because at least you can model it. You know your historical washout rate for a given region and a given week. The unmanageable risk is the other one. One accident, one failure of one component on one ride, and it doesn't just cost you a claim. Your premiums reprice, your contracts with fair boards get reviewed, The video goes on the internet, and every fair board in 3 states starts asking questions before renewing. In an industry that runs on multi-decade relationships, reputational damage is a balance sheet event. Curtis put it like this: in most businesses, insurance protects you from losing money. In this one, it protects you from losing the ability to be in the business. That reframed the whole thing for me. Let's go back to Jared, who wanted to buy a Carnival. I told him something that annoyed him a lot. I said, the equipment isn't the asset. You can buy rides. There are brokers, auctions, listings you can go look right now. If equipment were the asset, anyone with capital could enter this business tomorrow. The asset is the route. The route is the sequence of contracts, this county fair, the second week of June, this festival, the third week, this state fair in August. Those contracts are relationships, often going back 40 or 50 years, between one family and one fair board. That's why the leaderboard at the top of this industry barely changes year to year. The same names keep playing the biggest fairs. The largest operator in North America was serving 11 of the top 50 fairs on the continent in the 2025 season, drawing something like 9.5 million people across those events. Note: confirm current year rankings and attendance figures before recording. You cannot buy your way onto that list. You can't outbid your way in, because a fair board isn't just picking the highest percentage. They're picking whoever they're confident will show up, be safe, look clean, and not embarrass them in front of the county commissioners. So the moat isn't capital. The moat isn't even equipment. The moat is trust that took 3 generations to build and can be destroyed in one bad Saturday. That's why this is a family business almost everywhere you look. Not because of tradition, because of the math. The intangible asset doesn't transfer well to strangers. Which is exactly what I told Jared. He'd be buying 40 pieces of depreciating steel and hoping the relationships came with it. He didn't buy it. He bought a self-storage facility instead, which, honestly, was the correct answer. And also a much more boring video. So let's put the whole picture together. You own a mall with no land. Your anchor tenants cost 7 figures each, fold onto trailers, and need a welder on staff full-time. Your inline tenants print money, but only for 4 hours on a Saturday night. Your landlord takes a percentage off the top and has more leverage than you do. Your workforce depends on a federal visa lottery that closes before you know your own schedule. Your biggest input cost is diesel, and you can't pass it through because raising ride prices makes the 6 o'clock news. Your entire year lives or dies on about 20 weekends of weather. And the only real asset, the route, isn't on the balance sheet at all. And yet, there are families who have done this for 100 years and done very well. Because here's the last piece, the one I actually find kind of beautiful. The scarcity is the product. That midway isn't magic because it's good. Objectively, the rides at a permanent theme park are better. It's cleaner. But the theme park is there in October and in March and next year. The Carnival is there for 5 days. That's why you spend $80 without blinking. Not because the tilt-a-whirl is worth it, because it's Saturday, and it's here, and Tuesday, it won't be. Every ride ticket you buy is priced against a deadline. That's the whole business. They're not selling you rides. They're selling you the fact that they're leaving. So next time you're standing in that gravel lot at 9 at night and the lights are spinning, look around a little differently. Somebody drove that here overnight. Somebody rebuilt it in a field. Somebody's grandfather signed the first contract with that fair board in 1974, and somebody is watching the radar on their phone with their whole year on the line. If you got something out of this one, do me a favor and hit subscribe. This channel is a series, and we go this deep on a different business every single time. And drop a comment with the business you want me to break down next, because a lot of the best episodes on this channel started as somebody's throwaway comment. I read them. I'll see you in the next one.